Hi, and welcome back to the 100 Mold Project. Today's mold is Maya, and what you see here was the initial intended shape. It's a bowl interior with an angled cutout, and the plan to achieve this was by actually creating a two-piece mold. I went about a few ways of achieving this, but in the end, I thought the short cutout section should be its own mold, while the larger bowl section would be another. This meant the seam of the mold would sit on the natural angled edges of the cast piece. You can see it on one side here, but as you will see in later demolding videos, there are keys on every side to join the two pieces together. The issue arises immediately in that bottom edge as the concrete kept getting leakage. This is actually my first demolding, and this ends up being the worst. And I realized at this point that in my mind, the way I did the bottom keyholes and the sizing, the holes to fit into were actually smaller than the actual keys. And so I thought at this point it could still be tackled, and you'll see kind of that flashing. It just really is ugly. So here's my attempt two. This time I just fixed the hole size, and while the flashing here isn't as thick, and quite frankly this is probably my best version, it was still happening. So I went back to try again, this time changing the positioning of the keys and taking away one set of them on the sides, and it still got that flashing. That this time you'll see I try and sand it away to see if maybe these can be rescued and it'll just be a part of someone's process, but even with sanding you can see gross raw edges. And even though I kept changing the key spots or the shapes or the positions and methods to try to get it to fit together perfectly, would never quite work on this bottom edge. You can see in all these demolding videos, the sides actually have a little bit of flashing, but it works with the piece and I wouldn't be too bothered by it with a little sanding. But the thickness and the flashing on the bottom, I just couldn't deal with. The bottom edge has these round holes as keys, and I imagine that's going to have to change. And actually, as I was editing this video, the next iteration kind of came to me. On the second version, I think what I'm going to do is position the key along the 90-degree angle so that the concrete would naturally seep down, and it has a few edges to break the flow in the hopes that that seepage is really thin and easy to remove, and that flashing isn't as ugly. So that brings us to today's 10 of 100 in the 100 Mold Project. I was going to have to redo so many of the pieces. I decided to try to just salvage the main part of it, which was the big bowl part of it. It really does create a beautiful object and cast anyway, and the finishes from machining actually turned out so well I didn't want to waste it. The machining on this mold actually went backwards from my usual mill to lathe workflow. I started on the lathe here because the sphere interior couldn't be created on the lathe using any of the tooling I had, and I really didn't want to have to buy a new tool. I had actually seen a video by NYC CNC, who's another YouTuber who has some great videos on the best machining passes for a smooth sphere, and I'll link that video above if you're interested in watching it. I watched the video and a few times, and I just used their favorite option, which was a spiral contour with a 5/1000 step over. The finish is nearly flawless, so I hope I can use that skill again. I can't find any of the machining videos, so you'll kind of just have to look at this close-up view of the passes. They were super close together, and it took over an hour to do this. I just kind of walked away from it. And in the end, here you have it, which will be the Maya silicone mold. Here I am casting it. I ended up using Simmental for this one, and I usually do it on most of my 100 molds just because I'm usually in a hurry and I want to be able to demold it and shoot the start to finish pretty quickly. So this is Simmental, and then I actually used a liquid pigment I'm testing to see if it was concrete stable. It's a very deep dark red, and as you'll see in a little bit, it did not hold in the concrete at all. And here we have it demolding. It turned out really beautiful. As I said before, the machining on this worked out really well, and I'm super excited for you guys to see this. This one will be for sale, but not this week. It probably will take about a week to get everything organized and get it out the door. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe if you enjoy watching these videos.